On day 8, we'll be taking a bus out to Terezin to look around for the day. Here we are at the bus station headed to Terezin. Terezin is located north of Prague. It is made up of two parts. We'll look at the small fortress first and then the large fortress. From 1940 to 1945, Terezin was a Nazi concentration camp for Jews and other undesirables. The fortress here was built in 1790 by the Austrians to protect against the Prussian invasions along the Oye River. Out in front of the small fortress is the National Cemetery. It was dedicated in 1945 and buried people from the mass grave that was found there. Probably. Learn their history. During World War II, the small fortress is used as a Gestapo prison from the Gestapo in Prague. Over 32,000 prisoners passed through this area. 2,500 of them were tortured to death. The prisoners in isolation were kept in these cell blocks. Over 500 prisoners were put in this small room at a time. Cell block A is where the less dangerous criminals would be kept, and they would be sent out on work details during the day under armed guards. Cell block B is where they would keep the prisoners ready for execution, and they would use the old firing range for those executions. The shower facilities looked just like the gas chambers, and oh yes, there was no water hooked to these faucets. During World War II, the entire population of the large fortress was removed, and they used this as a concentration camp. The city still looks much like it did during the time as a concentration camp. Remember, this was not a death camp where they killed Jews. This is a concentration camp where they collected Jews. And this one was used as a model community for all of these Red Cross and others to come look at. At one time, over 50,000 Jews and other undesirables lived in this 1 square mile. 150,000 passed through here, and 35,000 of them died while here from natural causes, disease, and other things like that. The Jews here had minimum self-governing, so when the Red Cross and others came to look, it was a model community, and the Germans told them, this is what we're doing for all the Jews, and they could hide the death camps. But there were certain realities here also. As we said, 35,000 people died here, and they weren't allowed outside the walls, so they'd have their ceremonies for their dead here, and then they'd be taken to the morgue. And there was both a Jewish and a Christian burial room, since there were Christians here. Gypsies and other undesirables were killed just as the Jews were. At first they were buried after going to the morgue, but because so many were dying, they had to find another alternative, and they started using a crematorium to dispose of the body. The ashes were collected and kept in individual paper boxes in a columbarium. Next we'll head out and look at the crematorium. Now remember, since this wasn't a death camp, they were cremating people who died of natural diseases and other causes, and not people that were being murdered in gas chambers here. The furnaces were fired with natural gas, and it took approximately 30 minutes to reduce a body to ashes. And then we go over and look at the synagogue that was here. It was a secret synagogue, since Jews weren't allowed to worship even in this free town. Then it's time to leave Terezin and head back by bus to Prague, and then take the metro from the bus terminal back to our hotel, thus ending our day.
I tell you what, can you get